Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Outback. I'm Emily.
And I'm Tom.
Okay, so Tom, I have to start today with something that genuinely blew my mind when I found out about it. I heard this and I had to double check it because I thought someone was pulling my leg.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Australians get fined if they don't vote. You can get an actual fine for not voting. Is that real? Is that actually a real thing?
Yeah, that's completely real. Yep, 100%.
Okay, so you can literally be penalized by the government for not participating in democracy?
When you put it like that, it sounds a bit dramatic, but yeah, basically. It's compulsory. You enroll, you show up, or you cop a fine. It's just how it works here.
That is wild to me. Coming from America, where getting people to vote is this massive uphill battle every single election, the idea that your government just goes, no, no, you're voting, end of story, is kind of a lot to process.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be. For us, it's just sort of normal. It's like paying your taxes or renewing your license. You just do it.
Okay, I need to know everything. How does it work? Why does it work like that? And honestly, do Australians actually like it? Because I have so many questions.
All right, let's get into it.
And today we are breaking down how politics and voting works in Australia. For all of you international folks out there who, like me, had absolutely no idea.
And look, we're going to keep this fun. No spin, no taking sides, no yelling. Just a straightforward look at how the system actually works. And maybe why it's a little bit weird from the outside.
A little bit weird? Tom, I was today years old when I found out you can get fined for staying home on election day. We are starting there.
Fair enough. So yes, compulsory voting. Australia has had it since 1924, so it's been around for over 100 years now. It's not new.
Okay, so how did it come about? Who decided that?
So the short version is voter turnout was getting pretty low in the early 20s. Like dangerously low. Something like 59% at one point. And the government basically looked at that and went, yeah, nah, that's not good enough.
59%? Honestly, that sounds pretty high compared to some U.S. elections.
By Australian standards, that was considered a problem. So they introduced compulsory enrolment and compulsory voting. And turnout jumped up to like 91% almost immediately.
Wow, 91%. That's just, yeah, I don't think America would ever get to those numbers.
And it's stayed high ever since. We consistently get above 90% turnout at federal elections, which is, yeah, pretty good going.
So what's the actual fine if you don't vote? Are we talking a slap on the wrist or are you going to lose your house?
Nah, it's pretty small. Federally, it's around $20 for a first offense. It goes up if you ignore it, but honestly, it's not designed to be punishing. It's more like a nudge.
$20? That's like a coffee and a sandwich in some cities.
Exactly. It's not meant to be brutal. It's just enough that most people think, you know what? It's easier to just go vote.
And you do actually have to have a valid reason if you don't show up, right? You can't just say, I wasn't feeling it.
Yeah, you can give a reason. Illness, religious objections, you were traveling. There are valid exemptions. But I forgot, or I didn't like any of the candidates, don't really cut it officially.
Okay, so what do Australians actually think about it? Are people annoyed? Do they embrace it?
Honestly, most people just accept it. You'll definitely hear people grumble on election day, oh God, have I got to go vote again? But they still go. It's become such a normal part of life that questioning it feels almost strange.
So it's like complaining about doing the dishes but still doing the dishes.
Pretty much, yeah. Nobody's thrilled about doing the dishes, but the dishes get done.
I love that. Okay, so let's talk about what election day actually looks like in Australia, because I'm picturing something very different to what I grew up with.
Okay, so first thing, federal elections are always on a Saturday. Always.
Wait, Saturday, not a Tuesday?
Saturday. Because the idea is people shouldn't have to take time off work to vote. You do it on the weekend. Pretty straightforward logic.
Okay, that alone is something I wish existed in America. Voting on a Tuesday is so inconvenient. Who thought that was a good idea?
Yeah, that's always baffled me from the outside looking in. But anyway, so Saturday. And polling booths are usually set up at local schools, community halls, churches, somewhere close to where you live.
Okay, so you just rock up to your local school and vote? Is it a big deal? Long lines?
Usually not that long, no. It can take 10, 15 minutes, depending on how busy it is. But it's very relaxed. People are chatting. Kids are running around. It has this kind of neighborhood community feel to it.
That sounds so different to what I experienced growing up. Voting in the U.S. always felt very serious, very official. Like you go in, you do your civic duty, you walk out.
Yeah, look, it is a bit of a community event here. And then there's the other thing you absolutely need to know about Australian Election Day,
Oh, what would that be?
the classic democracy sausage.
I'm sorry, the what?
The democracy sausage, it's a sausage sizzle. There's almost always someone doing a barbecue outside the polling booth. You walk out, you grab a sausage and bread, maybe put some onion on it, and off you go.
You are telling me that Australians get a sausage for voting.
Not officially, but practically. Yes. The school fundraiser or the local community group runs the sausage sizzle. You vote, you buy a sausage for $2, everyone's happy.
Okay. You know what? I am significantly more willing to vote if there is a sausage involved. That is genius. That is the most Australian thing I have ever heard.
There's even a website, or there used to be, where people tracked which polling booths had sausage sizzles so you could make an informed decision about where to vote.
That's incredible. People are out there making geographically strategic voting decisions based on sausage availability.
Democracy in action, Emily. Democracy in action.
Okay, so you vote, you get your sausage, and then what? Do people make a big day of it?
Nah, mostly people just get on with their day. You might go with your family, vote together, grab something to eat, maybe stop at the shops on the way home. It's pretty low key.
I genuinely love that. The contrast is so funny to me. In the US, it can feel like this huge, dramatic national moment. Like every election is the most important election of our lifetime.
Yeah, we're a bit more relaxed about it, which we'll get into more a bit later. But first, let's talk about how the actual voting works, because this is where it gets interesting.
Yes. Because I'd heard something about preferential voting, which I only vaguely understand. Please explain it to me like I'm a smart person who just doesn't know anything about Australia.
Perfect. Okay, so in most elections, like in the US or the UK, you pick one candidate, tick a box, done. Whoever gets the most votes wins. Simple.
Right, winner takes all. First past the post.
Exactly. Now, the problem with that system is you can win with, say, 30% of the vote if everyone else is split. So the winner might actually be disliked by 70% of voters.
Okay, yeah, that's a real thing that happens. I see your point.
So Australia uses preferential voting. Instead of just picking one person, you number all the candidates in order of preference. 1 is your favourite, 2 is your second choice, 3 is your third, and so on.
Okay, so you're ranking them. Like, this person is my first choice, but if they don't make it, I'm okay with this person.
Exactly right. Think of it like ordering at a restaurant where you say, I'll have the pasta, but if you're out of pasta, I'll take the risotto. You're not stuck with nothing just because your first pick isn't available.
Oh, that's a great analogy. So what actually happens with those numbers when they count the votes?
So they count up all the first preferences first. If someone gets more than 50%, they win outright. Done. But if nobody gets 50%, then the candidate with the fewest votes gets eliminated.
Okay, and then what happens to the votes that were for that eliminated candidate?
They get redistributed. So if your first choice is out, your vote moves to whoever you put down as number 2. And the count keeps going until someone has more than 50%.
Okay, hang on. So the winner actually has to have majority support, not just whoever squeaked ahead.
That's the goal, yeah. The winner should be someone who most people can at least live with, even if they weren't their first pick. It's about finding the candidate with the broadest support.
Honestly, that sounds smarter to me. Like, genuinely, that sounds like a more representative system.
It has real advantages, yeah. One big one is it lets people vote for a smaller party or an independent without feeling like they're wasting their vote. Because your preference still counts even if your first pick has no chance.
Oh, wow. That's a big deal. In the US, voting third party is basically considered throwing your vote away. People get genuinely angry about it.
Right. Here you can genuinely vote for an independent or a minor party and still have a meaningful say in the final outcome. It does open things up a bit more.
Okay, I'm going to be honest. I walked in here thinking compulsory voting. That's a bit extreme. And now I'm like, actually, this whole system sounds pretty well thought out.
Ha! Look, it has its issues too. We'll get to those, but yeah, preferential voting is one of those things where once you understand it, first past the post starts looking a bit blunt.
Blunt is a good word for it. Okay, let's shift gears a bit, because I also want to talk about the leadership structure in Australia, because you have a prime minister, not a president, and that confuses a lot of people.
Yeah, so Australia is a parliamentary democracy, which is actually similar to the UK, Canada, lots of countries around the world. The Prime Minister is the head of government, but they're not directly elected by the public the way an American president is.
Wait, so you don't vote for the prime minister?
Not directly, no. You vote for a member of parliament in your local area, called an electorate. Whichever party wins enough of those seats to form government, their leader becomes prime minister.
Okay, so it's more like you're voting for the team and the team captain becomes PM.
That's actually a pretty solid way to describe it, yeah. The party chooses their leader, and if the party wins, that leader is the PM.
And I know Australia has had, how do I put this, a somewhat turbulent history with prime ministers in recent years. Like they seem to change a lot.
Oh, yeah. This is the thing. Because the PM isn't directly elected by the public, the party can actually remove their leader and replace them, even mid-term. And Australia went through a period where that was happening quite a lot.
How many prime ministers did Australia have in, was it like 10 years or something?
6 prime ministers in about 10 years, roughly. Which, yeah, it was a lot. People got a bit tired of it, honestly. There was a real public backlash to the constant leadership instability.
I can imagine, like, you go to sleep, wake up, and there's a new prime minister.
That is barely an exaggeration. There was a period where political journalists were basically sleeping with one eye open. It was hectic.
And there's also a whole other layer with state governments, right? You've got state premiers as well.
Yeah. Australia has 6 states and 2 territories. Each state has its own parliament, its own government, and its own premier, which is the state equivalent of the prime minister. So you've got multiple levels of government going on.
So federal government handles the big national stuff, and then state governments handle more local things like roads, hospitals, schools.
Broadly, yeah. It's a similar split to what you'd see in the US with federal versus state. And it means Australians get to vote quite a lot, actually. Federal elections, state elections, sometimes local council elections. It adds up.
Okay, so while we're on the structure of how it all works, can we talk about the actual parties? Because I feel like I should know who's who before we go any further.
Sure. So at the federal level, there are 2 major parties. You've got the Labor Party, which is centre-left, and the Liberal Party, which is centre-right.
Hold on, the Liberal Party is the conservative one?
Yeah, the name comes from classical liberalism, free markets, individual liberty, not liberal in the American political sense. So, yes, the Liberal Party is the Conservative Party. Australia just decided to keep everyone on their toes.
So when an Australian says, I'm a Liberal voter, they mean they're voting for the Conservative Party. I need a moment. This is genuinely upsetting to me.
Yeah, it trips people up. Now, the Liberal Party also typically runs in coalition with the National Party, which represents rural and regional Australia. Together, they're known as the Coalition. So in practice, it's Labor versus the Coalition.
Okay, Labor on one side, the Coalition on the other. Are there any other parties in the mix?
Yeah. The Australian Greens are a significant third force. They're progressive, big on environmental policy, and there's been real growth in independents and minor parties recently, which the preferential voting system actually helps because people aren't throwing their vote away by supporting them.
Right? As we discussed earlier. Okay, so how do these map to American politics? Is Labor basically the Democrats and the Coalition basically the Republicans?
Loosely, yeah. Labor is centre-left like the Democrats. The Coalition is centre-right like the Republicans. But the key difference is Australian parties are generally much more moderate than their US equivalents. The political spectrum here is a lot narrower.
So wait, are you saying that even your Conservative Party would be considered moderate by American standards?
Yeah, honestly, pretty much. Both major parties support universal healthcare, for instance. The debate is about how to run the system, not whether it should exist. A lot of Liberal Party positions would sit somewhere in the centre of American politics.
That's wild. So the whole political dial is just calibrated differently, less polarized overall.
Generally, yeah. There are still real differences between the parties and real debates. Don't get me wrong, but the extremes are less extreme. It's a different kind of political culture altogether, actually.
Okay, I want to talk about something you kind of touched on before, the Australian attitude toward politicians. Because I've noticed from what I have seen online that it's very different. Like Australians don't seem to worship their politicians the way some countries do.
Worship? No, definitely not. There's a very strong cultural thing in Australia called tall poppy syndrome, which is basically If you get too big for your boots, people are going to cut you down. And politicians are absolutely not exempt from that.
So nobody gets treated like a celebrity?
Very rarely. I mean, Australians can admire a good leader, sure, but the moment someone starts acting like they're above everyone else, the public turns on them pretty fast. There's this deep-seated suspicion of anyone who takes themselves too seriously.
Okay, let's get into the big question. Is the Australian system actually better? Like, is compulsory preferential voting the superior model? I want your honest take.
Okay, I'll try to be balanced here because there are genuine benefits and genuine downsides, so let's start with the upsides.
Yeah, let's do pros and cons. Hit me.
So, the biggest upside of compulsory voting is that politicians can't just focus on their base. When everyone has to vote, you need to appeal to a much wider cross section of the community, not just the people who are really motivated.
Right. Because in a voluntary system, politicians can win just by firing up their most passionate supporters. You don't need everyone, you just need your tribe to show up.
Exactly. But if everyone's voting, the swinging voters, the apathetic middle, the people who usually don't bother, you have to speak to them too, which in theory pushes politicians toward the center and away from extremes.
That's actually a really compelling argument. Like, compulsory voting might actually reduce political extremism.
That's the argument, yeah. Whether it's perfectly true in practice is debatable, but there's definitely something to it. There's also just the basic democratic principle that government legitimacy comes from broad participation.
A government that 90% of people participated in choosing does feel more legitimate than one where only 40% showed up.
Hard to argue with that. Now, the downsides.
Okay, yes, give me the cons.
So one big one is if you force people to vote, some of them just don't care. And they'll make random choices, or they'll just number the boxes from top to bottom without thinking about it, which is called a donkey vote.
A donkey vote. I've heard that term. So you're just numbering them 1, 2, 3, 4 straight down the page without actually making a real choice?
Exactly. And technically, your vote still counts. It's valid, but you haven't really engaged with the process at all. And some people argue, well, if someone doesn't want to vote, forcing them to do it doesn't produce a meaningful vote anyway.
That's a fair point, like quantity of votes versus quality of votes.
Right. And then there's the libertarian argument. Some people just feel that in a free country, you should have the right not to vote, that the freedom to abstain is itself a political statement.
That one I get. Like, if I think all the candidates are terrible, my way of expressing that should be allowed to be none of the above. I'm not participating.
Yeah. And to be fair, you can still submit a blank or informal ballot in Australia. You don't have to vote for anyone, but you still have to show up. And some people find even that paternalistic.
So you can go get your name marked off and hand in a blank paper?
Yep, completely legal. You've technically fulfilled your obligation, which honestly, for some people, that's the compromise they make.
Okay, so as an outsider, my honest take is that I find the Australian system genuinely appealing. Like the combination of compulsory voting plus preferential voting plus voting on a weekend plus sausages. It just sounds like a more functional and frankly more humane version of democracy.
Ha! I'll take that. Look, no system is perfect. Every democracy has its issues, but I think Australians are pretty lucky that a lot of the structural stuff is sorted in a reasonably sensible way.
Okay, I have to wrap up by returning to where we started because I cannot get over it.
The fine?
The fine and the sausage. You can get fined for not voting, and you get a sausage for doing it. That is the most perfectly Australian sentence I think I have ever said. It's a punishment and a reward system for civic participation.
You know what? You've just summed up Australia better than I ever could. Stick and carrot. Except the carrot is a democracy sausage.
I want that on a t-shirt. Fine if you don't. Sausage if you do. That's the slogan. Someone make that happen.
I would genuinely wear that. Look, all jokes aside, I hope today gave you a decent look at how this stuff actually works. It's a unique system. It has its quirks, but it functions.
It really does. And I think if you're watching from the US or the UK or Canada, there are bits of this that might make you think differently about how elections work back home. At least I know it made me think.
That's the goal. And hey, if you've got questions or you're Australian and you want to weigh in on whether compulsory voting is a good thing, drop it in the comments.
Yes, please. We love hearing from you. And if there's something about Australia you want us to cover, something you've always been curious about, let us know down below.
All right. That's it from us today. Thanks so much for watching Beyond the Outback. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more episodes. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. And may your polling booth always have a sausage sizzle.